should be available to view. Just to see that Lego process again, we created a cube. We scaled it up to get the proportions of the cube. We made a cylinder. We scaled it down. We moved it up. We spun our view around, and you can see how I'm just clicking on the arrows and not anything else. And then I can duplicate and put all these into position. Okay, so this process, it took me what, 10-15 seconds to make that. It'll go quicker. Last time it might have taken you 10 minutes, then 5, then 2, then 1, and pretty soon you'll be an expert at modeling this stuff like that. It's just going to come to you naturally, okay, where you don't have to think about what am I doing here or here or here, or even grabbing stuff and moving it. You can move stuff without even having to look at the screen. You can amaze your friends and dog. All right. So a couple of you stumbled upon a couple things that I want to point out. One of them is if we tap the space bar, okay? So tap the space bar on your screen, and what you're going to see is the 4 view, okay? And I told the Tuesday, Thursday class this too. Because I'm teaching the same class, I'm going to get confused and not know if I said something to you. So just ignore the fact that I'm saying it twice, and you just get extra information, okay? So if I didn't say this, in drafting, they have these 4 views that they typically work with. They deal with the top view, the front view, the side view, and the perspective view as far as what we look at. Top, front, and side are perfectly flat. Okay, we can't spin around them. They're perfectly flush, flat with our view. The perspective, however, we can spin around and move around. So this is a quick way to see all 4 of those views. We could also get to that from over here. This 4 view here takes us right to this same spot. We can go back to the one perspective by clicking on that, or using the spacebar tap, okay? Wherever our mouse is, my mouse is over the top view now. So if I tap the spacebar, it takes me into the top view, okay? If I tap the spacebar again, over the front view, tap the spacebar again, you can see how I can jump to all the different views. So take a few seconds and jump out of your view and practice jumping into the other views. Okay, so this is a quick way to be able to get to and from all these views. Yes, sir. That's what I'm going to go through next. Okay, so the annoying thing about this is that as everyone's hitting the space bar, we get this big white flash, and our eyes are already sensitive enough. I don't want that big white flash there, and especially if we had stuff inside each box, all that stuff has to refresh. It takes a long time to do, right? So what I like to do is if you go to move your mouse to the center of the screen and just hold your spacebar down. Okay, remember we talked about Maya and how it has like 7,000 menus? Well, this is all of those menus shown on one screen, okay? So on the top here where it says modeling, and we have mesh, edit mesh, mesh tools, mesh display, that menu bar is right here across there. If I switch this to rigging, I get a different menu set. If I switch it to animation, I get a different menu set. Okay? All of those menu sets are right here. So it's a very easy way to not have to constantly go up there to find your stuff. It's all within this thing. This is called the Hotbox because all your major tools are like right there. So if I'm modeling something, I can go to the modeling menus. If I'm animating something, I can go down here to animation. If I'm rigging, if I'm doing dynamics, if I'm rendering stuff, if I just need some basic information, I can go over there. So very easily I can get to any one of those. Now where this box also comes in handy is there's a bunch of hidden secrets in it. If I hold my mouse or my spacebar down and I click on the far right and hold, I get a bunch of menus here. If I click on the far left, I get different menus. If I click below it, I get different menus. If I click above it, I get different menus. Okay? So there's hidden stuff all over Maya that allow you to easily navigate to what you want. Typically, I don't use those outer ones, but I do use this middle one. If you click and hold right on the Maya, it'll bring up perspective, top, front, and right side. Those were those 4 different views that we had before. Okay? So if I want to jump to front view, there we go. If I want to jump to the side view, there we go. If I want to jump to the perspective again, or back to the top, there we go. So take another couple seconds and just practice holding the space bar, holding the left mouse, and going to the view you want to go to. Every time we switch to a different view, okay, so like if I switch this back to here, if I jump to perspective, or I jump to top, or I jump to side, either way, what I'm actually doing is going into a camera. Okay, there's actually a camera set up that's showing me what perspective looks like, or the front view, or the top view, or the side view. So imagine I have an object here. That's a horrible object. Why would I pick that? There you go. Maybe this will stand up straight with the help of the tape. There we go. Perfect. So if I'm looking at the top view, this shows me exactly what the top view looks like. I'm looking at the front. That's the front, and the side, exactly the side. So if I'm modeling something like a person or a car or a whatever, it helps to have image planes loaded in, and I can use the image plane to draw on top of it. So remember, like Photoshop, you drew a car, or Illustrator, you drew a cartoon character or whatever. It helps to bring these things in so you have reference. So if I'm modeling a car, I may load in my front camera. I'll have the front of the car. The side view, I have the side of the car. The top view, I have the top of the car. And I can use all these views to help line up where all this stuff is going to go. All right. So these are all actual cameras. These are things that we can see. So as I do this, I'm actually moving a camera around. So imagine that we have in the real world a camera, and I want to get close to something. That's what we're doing. I'm getting close to that by zooming into it with this camera. Now, it can be a bit scary because if I show all the objects in my scene and I zoom way out, you'll see these things. These are those cameras. Here's the top view, here's the front view, and here's the side view. So we can actually see these cameras. And if I loaded images onto them, that's not what I wanted to click. If I loaded images onto it, environment, create, picture, and I will just grab any picture that is on my computer. Cow, no folders here. I went to the wrong folder anyway. 2510, Lego. There we go. All right, so here I've loaded an image into this side view. There it is. And if I switch to my side view, I could then see that image right inside this view. So I could line my stuff up exactly how I need to line my stuff up in that view. Or I can delete that object, okay? But obviously it gets scary when you see those and you're like, what are these things? I can't delete them, because you can't. All right, so that's what those cameras are. So they're very easy to navigate by just doing this. That's the way I typically do it. There's even a more views, like there's a left view, a back view, and a bottom view. So sometimes those would come in handy. Like if we're building a Lego, we might need to see what the top and the bottom look like so we can model those two different areas because they look completely different. Or we may need to see the front or the back view of it, okay? And some things that also help is when we're doing something that we're modeling is to actually look at reference. So there's actually, surprisingly, a lot of images about Legos. What? I didn't want Lego dimensions. I wanted the dimensions of a Lego. Size. There we go. So they have schematics of Lego. So if we wanted to measure make a Lego exactly as a Lego is in the real world, we could actually do that exact thing. So we can get the exact dimensions of it. In Maya, we don't care about the actual dimensions of things. We care more about the look of it, right? So it doesn't matter if the Lego is, you know, more square this way than it is tall. We don't care. It's just as long as it looks good, that's what we're worried about, okay? So this is neat for reference, neat to kind of line things up, but definitely not necessary as we're building things. There's also a Lego guide there. All right, so that's another fun thing. The other thing we may have noticed is that if we were to create a cylinder, you'll see that this cylinder has no top on it. But a second ago I created a cylinder, and this cylinder does have a top on it, okay? These are two different types of surfaces. The one on the left here, this is a NURBS surface. It stands for non-uniform rational basis spline. And it's part of your definitions, 2510 definitions. So under NURBS, there it is, non-uniform rational basis spline, and it's a mathematically calculated formula, a surface, okay? So what that means to us is I want you to think about like the pen tool. You use the pen tool in Photoshop and Illustrator and all these programs. If you just were to click the pen tool without dragging out any handlebars, you end up with a very choppy line, right? It's very blocky. So if you wanted to create a circle, clicking a bunch of times, you would have to click like a whole bunch of times to create a nice smooth shape. So a polygon is essentially that. A polygon, which is this guy, he's essentially, you've clicked and clicked and clicked, and it just draws these straight lines. If I jump to the top view and we look at that cylinder, you can see that there is no transition. It goes from this point to that point to that point to that point, right? Right. On the NURBS though, what's happening is, where are you at? We have these points here, but it's actually smoothing it out. So now imagine that instead of clicking to create that circle, you pulled the handlebars out, and now you have a nice smooth transition from one side to the other. Okay? That's what a NURBS is. So NURBS are typically more mathematically involved because they don't actually have the handlebars, but imagine that they do have handlebars that kind of feature to keep it nice and smooth. Okay? So most of the stuff we're going to do in this class is going to be done using polygons. Most things in the 3D world are done using polygons. Okay? A long time ago we used to use NURBS because our computers weren't powerful enough, but now we can do those things, so we don't use NURBS anymore. Now if I click 1 on a NURBS, it'll actually look like the polygon. It'll actually look really blocky, like it's going from one point to the next. If I click 1 on the polygon, I get the exact same thing that I had before. If I click 3 on the polygon, I get this weird mess, because what it's trying to do is take this polygon, and what would it look like if it was smoothed out? That's all it's doing. Okay? So if I had this shape and I smoothed it out, that's what it would do. So I hit 1 to get it back to where it was, hit 3 to get this one back to where it was. Okay. So that's where we would be dealing with mostly polygons for everything we do. So when we create stuff, we go to the Create Polygon menu and we create it that way. Now another example is if I created a polygon cube, I'll set you here, and if I created a NURBS cube, and I set you here, you'll see that these look pretty identical. But if I were to click on the polygon and move it, I get this. If I were to click on the NURBS and move it, I get that. Okay? So this surface is actually composed of 6 different pieces. That's how the NURBS gets created. Just because it's mathematically calculated, that's how it creates that shape. Okay? So just another thing to be aware of. Oops. All right. So the other thing that we need to talk about is how do we can move objects. I can move an entire object along, but how do we move the individual pieces? Okay? How do I move individual parts of one of these objects? So I want you to click on one of your objects, any object in your scene, and then I want you to hold the right mouse button down on that object. Okay? Don't click anything, just hold the right mouse button down. And as you hold the right mouse button down, you'll see that a new menu's popped up. Okay? Again, hidden menus are all over Maya. Now in here we have several different things. On the top we have edge. Okay? But we're going to click left. I want to click left first. So go to vertex on the left. Okay? So we clicked vertex. What's the first thing that happened after we clicked vertex? It turns blue and purple points, right? So the purple points are the vertices. Those are all the little dots that we can use. What color was it before it was blue? Green. So Maya's color coding. So remember that when we're in component mode, which is what this is, everything's going to be typically blue and purple. When we're in object mode, which is what we were in a second ago, everything is green. Very important if we're moving stuff around. So I want you now to click on one of your points, go to the move tool, and just move the points around. So just try moving some of these points around. With any point selected, I want you to hit the B key. Just tap the B key. Okay? What happened here? It turned yellow. Okay, so B key is the soft select. Right? Soft select allows us to softly select something. Pretty self-explanatory. Now let's pretend I have a sphere, because I do, it's right there. And then I go to vertex on here. I click on this point. Do you see how we have yellow and then it gradiates to red and kind of like to black? As I move this one point, see how it's not moving just the one point now, it's actually moving a group of points, okay? So soft select basically says you click on one point and it creates basically like a mask. So it'll softly move all those other points so you don't get that rough transition that we would get otherwise, okay? So it's a neat way to be able to move stuff around without really deforming it or like making it look really abrupt. So very quickly we can kind of sculpt some stuff and move some points around using the soft select. Now for what we're doing now, we don't need to use it, but I have to show it to you because usually people accidentally hit the B key and something doesn't work. Like if I were to hit, where's my Lego? I don't have my Lego. Where's my cube? There it is. So if I were to go to vertex on here and click and hit B key, okay, it's not really going to do a whole lot, but let's pretend that I have my settings back to the default, and I'm trying to move this one point, and you can see what that one point is doing. It's kind of moving the entire thing. So anytime you see yellow and you don't want soft select on, just tap the B key, okay, and that will turn soft select off so we can just move that one point as we need to. All right. So now right click on your object again, and then we're going to go to edge. Okay, and edge is going to allow us to grab the edges. So all the lines that are on the surface, we can grab those and move those around. So just like before, take a second to grab some lines and move them around. So all of these things that I'm going over too, these are all in that definitions test or sheet that you're going to have on a test on. All right, so you're going to right click again and then go to face. Okay, and you'll see what face does is it allows us to grab the individual faces. All right, so we have vertices, we have edges, and we have faces. Those are the three main things that we are going to work with in this class. As you get more comfortable with the software, you'll know exactly like, okay, I need to grab edges, or I need to grab vertices, or I need to grab faces for this specific operation to happen. If we want to get out of this mode, we would hold the right mouse button down, and we would go to object mode. So hold the right mouse button down, go to object mode, and then we should be able to click on it and get it back to green. Okay? Because remember, anytime it's green, we're in object mode. So we hold the right mouse button down, we go to object mode, we can click on it again, and now we're back to that object mode. Okay? Now the other way to get in and out of that mode is using F8. So the function 8 key on the very top of your keyboard will get you into component mode, and then F8 will then take you out of component mode. All right. Now a cool way to, a neat way that we can use that is this. So you don't have to do this part, but I just want you to see it. Let's say I have two objects right here next to each other, and what I want to do is grab each one of these faces, and I want to move each one of those faces. Okay. So I don't want to grab this one's face and move it, and then go over to this one and grab his face and move it. And sometimes selecting these things like this can be a bit tricky, especially if, let's pretend we had 20 objects here or 50 objects. We wouldn't want to right click face on each one. So what we can do is we would use F8 for that. So if I hit F8, it automatically takes me to the last mode I was in, which was faces, and then I could grab this one, that one, move the faces around, move the faces whichever way I need to, in sync with each other, the way that I would want to move them. Or what I can do is come up here. Now this area, when I hit F8, see how this button changes right here, and this button changes? So this is showing me what do you want to select. So we right click and we go to vertex or edge or face, but up here I can right click and tell it what I want to select. Okay, and you're not going to memorize these right away, but you'll kind of get an idea that this is vertices, poly vertices. These are edges right here because it's a straight line, and then these are faces. So if I want to grab edges, I can turn these off, turn edges on, and I can grab these two and pull them up. Okay, I can even use like my scale tool and scale these things together like that. Scale these two things together like that, and then I can start creating some very cool shapes just by deforming these couple pieces. Okay, then I get out of it, I hit F8 again. All right, so we'll constantly be going back and forth between object and component mode. There's no way to shape stuff without going into component mode. Otherwise, we just have those default shapes. All right, so get comfortable with hitting F8. Get comfortable with using the right mouse button. Over the next 2, 3, 4, 5, 16 weeks, you're going to be doing this every single day you come in. Okay, so you have no choice but to do that. So that's component mode. There's other stuff up here too in the status bar that we're not going to really touch on right now. Part of these are snapping. Part of these are inputs and output stuff. Rendering we'll get to eventually. We have channels and layers and stuff we'll play with also. All right, so I think what I want to do now is I actually want to start building our mini room. Our first project is a mini room. I want to start building this mini room. Okay, so what we need to do first, you can just go to a new scene and then just hit don't save, and just don't save any of the stuff we've done because it's trash. Maya's taking an extremely long time to make a new scene. There we go. All right, so once we have a new scene, then we can start to build our project file. Okay, so remember I said that Maya likes to stay organized, and I believe last time 2510 work. Nope, I didn't. Okay, that was the other class. So what we need to do is we need to make a project. So inside the Maya settings, we're going to create a project. So under File, we're going to go down to Project Window. It's near the bottom-ish, and it's called Project Window. Okay, so we go to File, Project Window, and we need to create a project. So we're going to go to where it says Current Project, and we're going to hit New. On the far right, there's a New button. You click the New button. And I'm going to call this Sarcona _ mini room. And I'm putting Monday, Wednesday. You don't need to put Monday, Wednesday. I'm just going to drive myself crazy with organization if I don't have these two classes separated. Okay? For the location, click on the folder and find your work folder. And then, all right, so when you name a file, Windows will allow you to save your file as whatever it wants. So when you call your file, this is my file, stay out, exclamations, don't touch. Windows would probably accept that as a perfectly legitimate file name. But what happens is, number one, it's not really descriptive as to what it is. It's just their file, don't go in it for whatever reason. There's also like a bunch of dollar signs, a bunch of exclamation points, an apostrophe, a bunch of spaces in here. And so even though Windows itself would allow you to name your file like that, Maya does not like files like this. After Effects does not like files like this. Programs do not, okay? Your goal when you name a file is to keep it as simple and direct as possible. So naming your file something specific, like this is our mini room, so we would call this mini room, is very exact to what this is. Now, because we're going to be dealing with software and a computer, we have to have backups of our stuff even within our backups. So we can't just leave one file called mini room and continuously work off this one file. If this one file gets corrupt after 2 or 3 or 4 weeks of working on it, everything we've done for that 2, 3, or 4 weeks is gone. Okay? So I want you to get in the habit of naming them with a number at the end of it. Okay? So for this specific one, we're leaving it mini room. Don't touch that. Okay? This is our project folder. I'll show you the naming part afterwards. But this is for the exact file when we name our file. So mini room 01. or O2 or O3 or O4, okay? Now some people, when they save their file, they save it as O1, and then when they come in next class, they would save it as O2. They come in the class after, O3 and O4. Some people want to be a bit more careful. So what would happen is, if you came in next class and you're working on your stuff for 3 hours and you've saved it as O2, your file gets corrupt, so O2 doesn't open anymore, you have to go back one whole day's worth of work, right? So what some people will do is they'll do O1, O1, okay? And that's like they started class and they're starting with this specific file name. And then about 20 minutes or 30 minutes into class, maybe they name it O1, O2, because that's the first day, the second save. And then the next time they save it, O1, O3. And so for every day that they work, they're getting multiple files. Okay, so by the time you leave for the class that day, maybe you have 5 or 6 files. So if you do lose one of these files, you're not going back a whole day's worth, you're only going back a couple hours, if anything, an hour or 20 minutes. And then the next day you come in, maybe they would call it O2, O1, and so on, okay? So get in the habit of finding some sort of naming convention that's going to work for you so that you're very specific about your stuff. Now, the other way to name things is I like to use this way. So you see how in this case, I have a lowercase m and then a capital R. That's called camel casing. And if you get anyone who's ever done programming before, typically they're doing camel casing for all their variables and stuff that they're naming. So if you wanted to get into that habit, it's a great habit to get into. All the stuff that I save or I name, I try not to put any spaces in there at all. So for what we're doing, it doesn't really matter. Okay, you can call it mini room like this. I recommend not naming everything in lowercase because that's hard to read, or everything in uppercase because again, that's hard to read. Now it wouldn't be an issue if you're only working on your stuff, but the problem is eventually you want to go into the real world and start working at a company. You have to share files at a company, and at that company they need to be able to know what it is you're using. So something called mini room or mini room, very easy to read. These two are not very easy to read, okay? So as you work on your stuff, make sure you're naming what you're doing effectively. All right, so now in here, in this is our project folder, okay? So what Maya is going to do is it's going to make a folder called Sarcona Mini Room Monday, Wednesday, and it's going to put it inside this location, all right? And then what it's going to do is it's going to make all of these other folders down here. Now, of those folders, we're only going to deal with 3 main folders. So we're going to deal with scenes, Maya, scenes. Yeah. For some reason, I thought it didn't have a S at the end, but it does. Okay. Scenes, and this is our actual Maya file. Okay, so I would write these down so you know exactly where these things are supposed to be saved to. So when Maya saves something, it's going to save our file, our actual Maya file, all of our work into the scenes folder. If it doesn't go in the scenes folder, something is wrong and we need to stop what we're doing and find out what went wrong so we can fix it, and then everything will be happy. If Maya's happy, we'll be happy, okay? So scenes is where our actual Maya file goes. We deal with source images. And this is any pictures or textures that we're bringing into Maya. So if we build a wooden desk and we want the wooden desk to actually look like a piece of wood, we have to go to a texture website, download a picture of wood, put it into our source images folder, and then Maya can read it and put it onto our desk. Okay? Okay, and then after we're all done in Maya, the last thing is images. And images is where all the stuff is that's going to come out of Maya. So anything we're rendering out, anything we're sending out of Maya to be like turned in, would go into the images folder. Okay, these are the 3 main ones that we're going to work with. It's very important that we know where these are because Maya does a lot of stuff kind of in the background, and so if we're not paying attention, stuff gets missed. All right. The biggest one is this one, the source images. If you get a picture of wood, let's say, and you leave it in your downloads folder or on your desktop, and you put it into your desk that's in your scene, and then you come to school, that file is no longer in your source images folder, so it doesn't know where that picture of wood is, and it won't show it, and then your desk will be black, and then it'll look horrible. Okay? So you put it in source images, everything's bundled nicely together. All right. So we're going to go back to Maya, and we're just going to hit accept on here. All right, when we hit accept, you don't need to do this, but I'm going to show you in my work folder, it made this folder. A minute ago, that did not exist, and now it made that folder. And it also made all these other folders inside of here to help me stay organized. Okay, so for this to function, we need this whole folder here. Maya needs that whole folder in order for this project, this file, to open correctly so that everything is staying organized. All right. So now that we're in Maya, let's save our scene. So we're going to go to File, and we're going to go to Save Scene As. Okay. When we went to Save Scene As, which folder did it bring us into? Scenes. Okay. The Edit folder is inside Scenes, but it brought us right into this Scenes folder, showing us, hey, when you save something in Maya, I'm going to put you in the exact spot I want it to be. If that doesn't happen, we need to figure out why it didn't happen, okay? So let's name it. And again, we're going to go back to the nice way of naming things. So I'm going to name this mini room _01. And then just hit save as, okay? So now our file has been saved. And the Maya file format is Maya binary, MB, okay? There's also an MA, but most of the time we're using MB. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to build a room, and then we're going to populate the room with stuff. So the easy way to build a room is just to create a polygon cube. So everyone create a polygon cube, and then scale it up to be about as big as your grid. Okay, so this is where you can grab that center scaler and just scale that up to be as big as your grid. Okay, remember your hotkey for scale is R. It also matters where you're zoomed. You may have noticed if you're zoomed in like this and I scale it, it's actually going to go a little bit slower in how quick it scales up than if I'm zoomed way out here and I scale. So do you see how quick it scaled up that big from way out there? So just be aware of that. Your zoom does play a role in that. Okay. So now what I want to do is I'm kind of anal about having my stuff on the ground. So even though it doesn't matter, you see where my grid is like halfway through my box? I don't want my grid halfway through my box. I want my box sitting right on top of the grid. So if I look at my channel box, see this box way over here on the right? This is my channel box. You can access it via this little button right there if it doesn't show up. Whatever my scale Y is, I can cut that in half, and that will be my translate Y, and it'll sit perfectly on there. So I'd have to cut 514 in half, and that would give me 257. That seems right. Perfect. Okay. I could also round that. I could also just say this is 24 and that's 12. Okay, either way. Did you click the far right thing here? Good? Okay. The channel box is handy. It doesn't matter if it's like right on the ground. It's just my OCD, my need to have it sitting on the ground. Just makes sense to me so that as I progress on this, I know that the ground is at 0. I know the ground is that flat line right there, okay? Again, that's just me. You don't have to get it right on the ground. You could just move it up, or you could leave it there in the center if you really want. Just don't show it to me. All right. So now what I want to do is we want to see into the room. So right now we can't see into the room. We can zoom into it, but it's kind of dark in there and I don't like that. Okay? So I want to see into the room. So I need to delete this face. So how do I delete that face?
You select it with the composite mode on that face.
Yep. So we just right click and hold, go to face, so we're in component mode. Click the face, doesn't matter which one, and hit delete. Okay, so right click and hold, go to face, click the face, and then just hit delete. And then get out of component mode. So we just go back to object mode. All right, so now we'll see that our room has an opening, so we can actually see into this room, but you'll see it's still dark in there. All right. Now, even though we have an opening in there, you would think light's going to go into the surface, but there is no lighting in the scene right now. This is just flat coloring. What the black signifies here is the bottom or the back side of that face. Okay, so this face is like paper thin. One side is the outside, one side is the inside. So that's what it's showing us as where that inside is. So what I want to do is I'm going to go up to Mesh Display, and I'm just going to say Reverse. And what that should do is flip it so that my face is now the other way. You have to just make sure you're in object mode. So make sure you're in object mode, in green mode, and then you can go back to reverse under Mesh Display, and then you should be good. Okay, and then you can just click off of it.
I'm sorry, where was Mesh Display?
Right at the very top.
Oh, there.
Okay, now remember too that if I say a menu and you don't see it right up there, you could also hold down the space bar and find it right here, reverse. Okay, so all this is doing is swapping what is outside and what is inside. So under Mesh Display, reverse. So anytime you see that and you're like, oh geez, it's black and I want it to be gray, you can do that. All right. So our room is perfect. We don't want to touch the room anymore at this moment. What we do want to do is lock the room so that it doesn't move. Like I don't want to accidentally go whoops, or even worse, like rotating it, okay? If we rotate it, which people have done, it's very difficult to line everything up, okay? It's possible, it's just very difficult. So what I want to do is I'm going to come over here. So you see on the far right where it says Layers, Display Layers, we're going to click on the far right button with our object selected. Click on that far right button, and that makes a layer for our room. And then we can double click layer 1 and call this Room Shell, and then save. Okay, so we click that layer to make a new layer, assign it to it, and then we just double click the name and just call it Room Shell or whatever you want to call it. All right, now all of this kind of stuff is object mode. So as we mesh displayed and we reversed, that was an object mode. As we click the layer to add it to it, that's an object mode. If something happened where we didn't have the object selected and we added this layer, we can always right click on the layer and then add it to it later. Okay, so if we accidentally didn't add it, we can. Now to test that it's there, hit V. Okay, so you should see that box going in and out. Okay, so if your box turns off after you've added that layer, then you should be good. All right, so what that does, it puts it on a layer so that we have it on a layer. We can turn it off, turn it back on. Now what we want to do is lock the layer so that we can't edit it. The far right button inside this layer, if we click that 2 times until we get an R, so it says VPR there, then that would reference it, meaning that I can't click this object anymore. That's what we want. Okay, so click it until it says R, and then we shouldn't be able to click on that box again. Everyone's happy?
What's P do?
P, I have no idea. I don't use that one. I don't know. V is visibility, and then R is reference, and template, and off means I can grab it again. See, now you got me curious. I'll have to look it up later. All right, so now what we want to do is we want to build a desk. So when we build anything in Maya, our first step is not to just start building something. Our first step is to get reference. We want to see what our desk should look like. So we go to, not YouTube, we go to Bing and we look up desks. Okay. Now, if you're curious, Bing is a superior image search engine than Google, but for other stuff, it's not very good. So what we want to do is look at desks. Look at desks. Find a good desk here. Now, I want to do something very simple. I'm going to do something different than I did in the other class, just so that if you wanted to reference both, you could reference both. Some of these are very complex shapes, so I don't want to go too complex on what we're doing. This might be a neat one to make. Make a very modern room. Okay, so with something like this, we can create that pretty simple. Okay, so my first step again is to get reference. I believe I talked about Pinterest before in this class. Yes. Okay, so Pinterest is very cool for getting reference, especially ahead of time. If you don't have the software at home or you're sick of playing with it and you just want to get reference images, go to Pinterest, make a board, and you can just find a bunch of stuff, reference images. Okay, so we're going to make this one. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to build it first. You're going to watch me, take notes if you need to, and then we're going to build it together. Okay, so I want you to watch how I build this. So my first thing is I'm analyzing the shape. So as I was looking at this picture, I'm watching that and I'm trying to figure out where the hard parts are. Okay, something straight like a cube, no big deal. Something like this turn though, that's a bit trickier to do. So I need to figure out in my mind how I'm going to create that shape. Okay, so I have the idea down, so now I'm going to execute it. As you practice in Maya, you'll get all these little tricks about how to create shapes, and then you'll start to implement them. Okay, so my first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a cube. And I know that seems kind of weird judging by that shape, but that's what I'm going to do. All right, and I want to get this to be roughly that same proportion. So I'm looking at this piece here and basically building a cube around that shape. Okay, so imagine that I'm fitting this desk into a box. That's what I'm looking at. Oops, scoot you over there. All right, so now he's fitting inside that box. Maybe a little bit smaller for the room. Okay, so now what I need to do is I need to get rid of the stuff that I don't need. Okay, so I'm pretty sure that I don't need this. I'm pretty sure I don't need that. And I'm pretty sure I don't need this. Okay, so I just deleted those three faces. So just like we did on the bigger box, I just minimized the faces that I have on here. Okay, so this gives me that shape, that very blocky look of a shape. Now I need to round these corners. So for this, I don't need to go to faces, I need to go to edges and click this edge and shift click that edge. Then under mesh tools, under edit mesh, there's a bevel. Okay, and bevel, if you look at it, look what it did. What? It makes these blocky shapes. So it took that corner and it just cuts it. Okay, so right now it has 0.5 as the fraction. So it basically cut this face in half, cut that face in half, and then it just added this division right there. If I take these segments and I click and drag to make more, do you see the shape that we're getting now? Very cool. Now this is obviously a little bit too round for our picture that we have there, so I need to take this fraction down. So all of these things that pop up, this is a little marking menu, option box thing that we can adjust. All of them are very adjustable. Okay, as I click and drag, watch the numbers. See how it goes 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5? What if I want to get something between those numbers there? Okay, I can hold Control. Yes, there we go. And if I hold Control, you can see I have finer movement on those numbers. And I think if I hit Shift, I have bigger movements. Okay, typically don't use Shift. All right, so now I'm going to get this to be about that. That looks pretty good. All right, and then I'm going to go back to object mode because I'm done with beveling. Okay, I think this could be a little bit thinner. That. All right, And then what I want to do is I need obviously thickness to this because right now it's way too thin. I have to scratch my back. And then I'm going to go to object mode. I'm going to go to edit mesh, and then there's another tool called extrude. And what extrude is going to do is it's going to take that face and give it thickness. So I go to extrude. We get another pop-up box here. I'm going to use the thickness slider. Turn down for what? Look at that. That's that desk. That's pretty close to that desk anyway. Okay? So you see how we can very quickly create these things. We break it down into simple shapes. I needed the box. I needed rounded corners. So I know how to use bevel. I know how to use extrude. I know how to get those two things there. Now the other part of this, you can see there's some drawers right here. So we're going to add those drawers in also. So back to object mode. Always go back to object mode after you get out of the tool. All right. So I'm just going to make one big drawer right there. That'll be easier for what we're going to be doing. So in order for me to isolate that area, I need to go to face mode again. You see how I'm always jumping back into face or edge or whatever. And I'm going to grab this face. I'm going to go to extrude again. And instead of using thickness, I'm going to use offset. And I know I'm going to need to hold control as I drag. Okay, it's turning black and it looks weird. It's going outside. I'm going to go the other way and bring it into about there. I'm going to grab this. That's a little bit too much. I'm going to grab the red here and pull this in. That looks pretty good. Okay, now before I get out of this tool, I'm going to extrude again. Okay, so I'm going to extrude again. And I'm going to change my offset down just a smidgy. Like that. It's very tiny. It's a very fine opening right there. Okay. Now if we zoom in really close, you can see how there's a tiny edge here. Okay. So if I click this one, hold down Shift and double click this one, it'll loop it around. Okay. So it selects all the faces around that. And then I'm going to go back to extrude. And I'm just going to grab this blue arrow and just tuck it in a bit. And then we go back to object mode. And there's our desk with a big drawer in the front. Okay. Now I could have divided that up further to give me more openings, but I don't think I want to do that. I think having one big one right there is good enough. Now that is not a drawer, right? I didn't build any hardware to it. I didn't build anything that will pull out. I made it look like it's a drawer. So something like this is just for looks. If this was a, sometimes you'd have a manufacturing piece where they want to animate the drawer opening up, I'd model it a bit different, okay? If this is going in a game, I'd model it a bit different. For what we're doing here, we're just playing with the tools. I just need to get the idea across that this is my desk, okay? So this is what we're going to do now. So I'm just going to hide this desk. There we go. It's underneath. And then we'll make this other one together, okay? So first step, what do we do? Create a cube.
Before we start, how do you lock the shell?
The lock. Polygon. Always polygon. One time we use NURBS is never. Okay. Don't be afraid of the size of this right now. What I mean by that is if you don't have it the exact size you need, don't worry about that. You can always resize it later if we need to. The biggest thing is proportions. How wide is it compared to how tall, compared to how deep it is? I don't know what the other one would be. Length, width, and depth, whatever. Okay. And you also cannot go by my numbers ever, because my numbers are going to be different. If I scaled my box up 3 times as big as yours, my numbers are going to be different than yours. So if I scale it or I extrude it and whatever, you can't go by my numbers. All right. So now we have a box in there. So what was the next step of this? Delete the faces. So we go to face mode. So we hold down the right mouse, go to face mode, and we grab those 3 faces and we delete them. The front one, the back one, and the bottom one. So we're left with just this rainbowish shape. Okay. If it helps too, you can always jump to wireframe, and that usually helps you kind of see the faces a little bit better to select them. So I will, just like I'm switching out of component and object mode, switch between these two modes. Okay, so then what do we do after we grabbed this? The bevel. So we have to go to the edges, right? So we right click and go to edge, and we click on that edge, we shift click that edge. And then we go to edit mesh, and we go to bevel. So remember, we can hold control to control that fraction number more refined. We can hold control, or not control, we can just click and drag on the segments to add more segments in there. Obviously, the more segments we have, the smoother that curve is going to be. But we don't want to overkill it. The more divisions we have, the longer it's going to take when we get to other stuff. So we don't want to put in like 6,000. 8 or 10 is going to be good.
What did you click again to make it go slower?
Control. You just hold the control key and then just drag right on the word fraction. Okay. Sliders are very important to Maya. It makes it very easy to tweak all of these settings. All right. Now what do? We extrude it. But before we extrude it, we have to go to object mode. Okay. So we right click, go back to object mode, click on the object, and then we go to edit mesh, and we go to extrude. Okay, now for this one we're using the thickness. So we're just going to hold control and use the thickness to give it thickness. Now obviously you have to keep in mind how thick that drawer is going to be. So make sure you drag that up to be thick enough for the drawer. All right, so here's where we are with our desk. Now we need to create that drawer area, okay? So to create the drawer area, what was our first step?
Go back to object mode.
Yep, go back to object mode, and then we need to
Face.
face mode. So go back to face mode after that, and we're gonna grab that front face. Okay, and then we're going to extrude that front face inward. So we go back to edit mesh, we go back to extrude, and instead of using thickness this time, we're going to use offset. Okay, and again, holding control will give us more control. Listen, you've seen Ghostbusters before? Probably not, your kids. All right, awesome. So we don't cross beams, we don't cross lines. So you see how my edges, see how they crossed right here? That will give us some funky results, okay? You see the pattern that's on the front of that face where it's kind of like speckly? That means I've effed things up. So I need to un-F things up by fixing what I just did.
EF, right?
Yeah, DF it. So here, you can see these edges, they go right to this. Perfect. There's no like overlapping or crossing or anything weird happening. So we need to make sure that we're cool there. All right. So we've done that. Now we need to extrude it again and offset again so we have a nice littler one. Oh, sorry, I forgot one more thing. I need to scale it in. This drawer here is a little bit more inset, so I want to inset mine a little bit, but not in every direction. So I can grab the red scaler, see the red box? I can grab that red box and scale that in a touch. Okay, so I just grab the red box and scale it in, and that scales it just in that one direction. So if I needed this drawer right in the center like this, I could make just that drawer in the center, or I could scale it out a bit more. Okay, once we've scaled that in, then we can extrude it again. And then offset it inward another smidge. All right, so now what we need to do is grab this edge, and you can go through and click, or sorry, not the edge of face. I can click this face, hold shift, click this face, hold shift, click that face. Let's go to the other side, hold shift and click that face. That is one way to do it. Obviously that's the long way to do it. Click one, hold down shift, double click the next, and it'll loop around. Okay. All right, so now I'm just going to go through and extrude that face. And you see that there's a bunch of stuff on here, right? Just like we saw before. These boxes are for scaling. We're not scaling this. These are for other stuff. Don't worry about those. Typically, in 90% of the time, you're going to play with the thickness, the offset, or this blue arrow. Okay? So typically, that's what we're going to be dealing with. So there's our desk. Let's right-click and go to object mode, and then click on it to say that we're done with our desk. All right. Now, just an extra couple features of this. Don't think that anytime you're done with it that it's like locked into that and you can never change it. Eventually, you'll get comfortable enough where you're like, oh, I need this to be thicker. Now it's thicker. I need it to be taller. This is where it's going to get kind of weird. Okay. See how it like stretches it out? But if I go to my components and I grab these, see, taller, shorter, whatever, doesn't hurt it. Also this, I can make it longer without distorting it that way too, because if I went the other way, it would distort it. Okay, so eventually you'll get to that point where you're like, okay, I want to grab vertices, I want to marquee all of these, and I just want to move them to make a shorter desk or a longer desk. And if we were creating like a classroom situation or something, we could actually use this as a template and create multiple desks and put them all over the place. There we go. All right. So we're going to take our desk. We're going to shove it to the. Oh, let's leave it there. Now, let's not shove it yet. Just leave it there. We're going to put it on a new layer. That's what I want to do. So on the far right, again, we make sure our object is selected in object mode. It's green. We click on the far right button, and then we can double click and label this desk. Okay, and then we can click the R to make sure that it's on reference mode so that it doesn't is not selectable. All right. So now the desk is pretty boring. We've gone with kind of a modern desk look, so we need to create some modern desk items. So what I want to do is create something. Look at that fancy desk. That's exactly what we've just done. Okay. That's pretty much what we've just done, except they kept that bottom face and then they beveled all the way around it and they still extruded it, and everything else is pretty much the same. So there's very easy ways to do this kind of thing. I want to create something for the top of the desk. So let's find something for the top of the desk. Hey, there's our desk again. That's the back side, I think. Nope, that's the right side. So what we want to create is something like this. Okay, so you see this little organizer for the top of the desk? We want to add that organizer to the top of the desk. But because the one thing is round, obviously we want to maintain that roundness on there. Come on, Bing, don't let me down. Here we go. Hey, there's our desk again.
Bing's #1 search is Google, you know that.
What? All right, so we're going to create something for the top of the desk, kind of like a drawer or organizer for it, okay? Kind of like a bookcase. What's doing there? So something like this thing here or that thing there. That's actually like more in line with what we would be doing, okay? So we're going to create something that we could put on the back of this, put our CDs in or whatever else you want to put, thumb drives or whatever. So we're going to start off the same way. I'm going to do it, and then you're going to follow along, and we'll do it together, okay? So the first thing I want to do is create a cube. Again, I start off pretty much everything with a cube. Even if I'm modeling a person, I start off with a cube. That's not a joke, that's serious. I'm going to set it up to be just like before, like where is this thing at? The difference in this one is that I'm going to be basically building it like it's one piece of wood. So imagine like that bottom piece of wood that would go into creating this. That's what I'm building here. It's a nice thing about having these on layers. I can just turn off that room and I can actually see around this stuff. All right, so I'm kind of lining this up. I don't want to go too far over to those edges because it would look weird if there's a rounding and there's this piece of wood hanging off. So I keep it kind of in the center. That looks pretty good there. So now I'm starting the planning phase. So what I want to do is I want to have a piece of wood, like cubby holes inside the center of this thing, okay? So what I need to do is I need to basically have an area here and here and here and here that I could put cubbies, all right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and insert some edge loops, okay? So over here is subdivisions. So if I click on my subdivisions and I add like 10 loops, you can see how I can add divisions right into here, okay? And if I go to something more realistic, like 5 I think would be good. I'm looking at this as how many cubbies I would have. Right now I would basically be creating 5 cubbies, or I could do like 2 long ones and 1 short one or whatever. I think I like the idea of having 2 long ones and 1 short one in the middle. So 5 I think is probably going to be good. Yeah, that should be good. Now what I need to do is I need to have a division here of where these cubbies are located. Right now, just to show you where I'm going to do these. So 2 of these are going to be here. There's going to be 1 in the middle, and then there'll be 2 right there. Okay, like 2 long ones and 1 in the center. But I don't have the wood set up in here for where those dividers would come in, right? So otherwise I just have 1 big opening. I don't want that. I want dividers. So I'm going to go to my edges, and just like we shift double clicked for those faces to grab the loop, I don't have to hold shift. I can just double click and it'll grab a loop of edges all the way around. So you see how it looped those edges? So I'm going to hold down shift, double click, and it loops those edges. Here it's not going to do it. I'm going to just try this and see if that'll work anyway. Okay. So what I'm going to do is to create those dividers, I'm going to add a bevel. And you saw what the bevel did here. It created a nice rounding. Where on a flat surface, though, it creates just this area that's basically like a divider. Just this area I could use to extrude stuff from. All right. Now here, it like inset it. I don't want to inset it. So roundness 0. That's not going to do anything. And this is just me trying to see if there's a way to not get it to do that. Nope, it's still going to do that. Whatever. Not terribly, you know, it doesn't kill me. I just didn't want it to do that. I'm going to hit undo. There we go. All right, so I don't want these edge ones. I'll play with those later. I'm just going to do these 2 here, and I'm going to bevel. And then I'm going to set my fraction to something lower. 0.1. 0.05, whatever, okay? This here is the thickness of the wood. So when I have these little dividers coming up, that's what that thickness there signifies. All right, so I need wood areas here on the side that I can set up as dividing areas. So what I need to do is I need to create a division right here and right there. So under Mesh Tools, there's this tool called the Insert Edge Loop. So I'm going to click there. And then I click and drag along this edge, and you can see how it creates a loop right about here. Okay, so if I hit undo, that should be good there. And that should be good there. Okay, so now I've added a loop here. I've added a loop there. I'm also going to add, I should need a loop in the back. That should be fine there. Everything else should be good. Okay. So I have enough loops now, so now I'm going to grab these faces. And there's other ways that we could easily select stuff. So I just shift clicked each one of those. Again, it takes a long time to do. If I click this face, I come over here and shift double click. It'll grab the shortest path to that face. Okay? So it knows like you want to grab these faces and it automatically does it. So again, however you want to do it, it's up to you. So I'm going to go through and extrude, grab the blue arrow only, pull it up, and this is going to be how big the cubby is. The cubby's about that big. Extrude again, and now I have a piece of wood for the top. There we go. So then I'm going to grab these faces, not these board ones, the boards stay there. I'm going to extrude those faces, grab the blue arrow, and now we'll have these little cubbies. Now if I go too far, see how it turns black? That's because I've gone out the back of this. Okay, so you have to be careful we don't go out the back. Now the thickness there doesn't matter. We can't see how thick that is, so as long as it's as deep as we need it to be, it's perfect. All right, back to object mode, and there we go. Okay, so the biggest thing with this one is planning where those divisions were at. If I put the divisions in a completely different spot, I would get a completely different look to what I have here. Even taking this design further, I could even take this. We're not going to do it for ours. This is just something silly to see. And pull that up, and then extrude it again. And I can grab this one and extrude it. And now you see how I've created a little cubby on top with those boards right there. Because I have the two divisions and the one in the middle, it's an easy spot to kind of compartmentalize where we want those things to be. All right. All right, so now let's shove that below. I have 2 desks in my room. All right, so now let's do this one together. Let's create a cube and set it on our desk and get it sized up for where we want that cubby to be. Now remember, this is going to be that bottom board, so it's going to be pretty thin. All right, so now what we're going to do is add divisions. So over here in the channel box, there's a polycube, whatever number you're at. I'm at 5. You might be at 2 or 3. Okay? So you're going to click on the polycube to open up these options, and then you're going to add 5 divisions for your width. Now keep in mind that you may have modeled your stuff different than me. My model is going widthwise. That's how it's adding those divisions. If you added your divisions and it looks like this, then you modeled yours in a different direction than mine. Okay? So I modeled it facing this way. You may have modeled it facing that way. No big deal. Just swap which one you have. They should be going the other way. They should be going that way. So it looks like little boards going across, not thin strips. All right, so we have these divisions here. So now what we need to do is put in those extra divisions for where the boards are going to go. So we need to right click and go to edge, and then double click the one edge loop. So I just double click like this edge right here, and then I shift double click the next one. Okay, so you may have to get close to it so you can actually see those edges and don't accidentally select something that you're not supposed to select. It's very easy in Maya to grab a back face, a back edge, an edge that's totally not connected to anything you want to select at all. Okay, and you can always use, again, wireframe to just verify I have just these 2 loops selected. All right, once you have those 2 loops, edit mesh and go to bevel. And then just shrink that fraction number until it's the size of the boards that you want to use for those dividers. 0.1 for me seems to be a good number. Maybe 0.8, 0.08. Yeah, that's better.
Yeah, this doesn't look good.
No.
Why is it so difficult to make a screw?
No, don't extrude yet. Okay. So once you have these, oh, this bevel. Sorry. Yeah, this was the bevel. Once we have this, then we're going to go to the mesh tools, and we're going to use the insert edge loop tool. Okay, so mesh tools, insert edge loop. And depending on which edge you click on, it will add edges different ways. So if I click on an edge going this way, it adds it that way. If I click on an edge going this way, it adds it that way. So I want to create an edge going up and down like this. So I'm going to click on an edge going left and right. So I click and drag, and I try to emulate, however thick this is, I try to emulate it there. All right, so now we have these. We need to go to face mode. Before we get to that, just to show you this, we can be more accurate with these things too. If we go to object mode and I go to the split ring, these have a weight. So as we were dragging those edges, imagine that the start of this face that face right there, the start of it over here was 0 and the far right side was 1, okay, and split that up into a bunch of divisions. That's what these weights do, okay? So if we come in here and we start playing with these weights, you can see how I can offset it. So 0.5 takes it right to the center of that face. 0.1 takes it all the way to the left. 0.9 takes it all the way to the right. So you can have a little bit more accuracy on these things. But for what we're doing right now, it's not terribly important. All right. So we're going to go to face mode now. And depending on how you want to do this, you can shift click each one of these faces. There we go. Or you can click on the first face, hold down shift, double click the last face. We just need those top faces selected. Okay, once we have those top faces selected, we're going to do 2 extrudes. We're going to edit mesh extrude. Grab the blue arrow and pull it up. That's the size of the cubby. All right, once we have this pulled up this far, then all we have to do is extrude it again, making sure that those faces are still selected. If you deselected, you need to reselect the faces. So again, no big deal. Reselect the faces and then extrude again, pulling it up for the thickness of the wood now. So like how thick is the wood that would be on top of that cubby. Okay, once you have that, then you can just grab the faces in the middle, extrude it again, and push it inward. So one thing you may have noticed, that as we were extruding this upwards, that blue arrow originally was facing up, right? So when we grabbed these faces and we extruded, the arrow was facing up. But then when we grab the front faces, the arrow is facing outward, right? So that extrude tool actually recognizes what you have selected. So if I go onto this sphere and I grab a face here and I extrude it, do you see how it kind of turned it a little bit and it's making this kind of come straight out from that surface? If I grab one up here and extrude it, it does the same thing. If I grab one over here and do it, it does the same thing. So it recognizes the direction of the face and it'll automatically pull it out to that direction. Sometimes we don't want to do that, but for right now, that's what it's doing. This is a great way to be able to create some pretty cool stuff like, I think I grabbed all those, yep. Oh, I missed. There we go. So I'm going to extrude this again. I'm going to take my offset down a bit. Whoa, too much. There we go. I'm going to extrude again. Push it in a bit. Delete. Boom. Look at that. So it looks kind of neat. But again, just doing extrudes, we can create some very cool shapes. When you model a character, a car, or whatever, these three tools that we've used are used over and over and over again. Beveling, inserting edge loops, and extruding are the 3 tools typically you're going to use every single time you come into Maya and your modeling stuff. Hey, how'd they get upside down? So it's important that we kind of get an understanding of all of those tools that we played with. All right, so now what we need to do is I need to take this box here, the cubby on top, I need to put it onto the desk layer. So I'm going to click my box here. I'm going to right click on the desk layer and add that in there. Okay, making sure it's in object mode and not component mode. Okay, so make sure your box is on your layer. Okay, and if it is, then that means that we can't select the things anymore. So I can't select any of this stuff because the desk layer was locked, right? So we can't do anything. Now I want you to also click on this button over here that says Alt L, in your shelf that you created, there's an Out L outliner. That's what that stands for. Okay, if you don't have it there, you can go to Window and go to Outliner, and it will show up there. And in the outliner, this lists all the stuff in our scene. Your shelf is gone. Lists all the stuff that we have in our scene. So P cube 1 and P cube 1, if I turn my room shell back on, that's the room shell. P cube 2 is this desk. P cube 3 is that desk. 4 is this thing. 5 is that thing. So you can see once we've modeled, let's say, an entire room, we're going to have a bunch of stuff called P cube 1 through 100. It gets very difficult to figure out what's what. So we should go through and rename all of our stuff so we know what is what. Okay? So I'm going to go to number 1 here on the list and see what it is. It's the outer shell. So I'm going to double click P cube 1 and call it outer shell. You click on it in the shelf that we made, which is Out L, or you go to Windows, Outliner. Then you can double click the next one and say Demo Desk 1. And I'm just going through labeling each one. Demo copy. Okay. Again, we need to stay organized because Maya has a bunch of stuff all over the place that we are going to need to rename so that things stay organized. If you have a scene, like let's say this scene, you might have a wood material, something that looks like, makes your objects look like wood. You may have something that makes it look like plastic, metal, different colors of plastic, different colors of metal, glass, whatever. All of those things need to be labeled too. So throughout, we're going to be labeling everything that we do. So then what we need to do is we should probably just save this real quick. So just go to File, Save. Okay, overwrites the last file, saves it just like it is. You can also hit Control S, and that will save it too. We also want to take the two desk items, and we should put those together, okay, so that we can move those together so that they're not separate pieces. So I'm going to click on my, I called it Class Desk, and Class Cubby, you click on whatever you want, whatever you named them, okay? So you can use the Control key in the outliner to select multiple items. And then I'm just going to hit Control G. And that will group them into the same group, which I can call Desk Group. Okay? As I'm in here and I move this back to the back wall, okay, now the item is grouped. And grouping means something different inside Maya than it does inside of other programs. If you group something in Illustrator, everything is basically as one item and you have to go to a special tool to grab all those individual pieces. In Maya, it's not like that. I'm going to unreference this just so I can select them, but even though these are grouped, you can see how I can select these items individually. So that can become an issue if I need to grab the group and not the individual item, because I can grab this and move it, and that's different than me grabbing both items and moving it, or grabbing the group and moving the group. Okay, so we just need to be aware that grouping and selecting individual objects is something different. Okay, inside here in the outliner, that's the easiest way to grab your group. Just click on an object, it shows you what group it's in, and then you can click the group to grab the entire group. All right, cool. All right, so let's save our work that we've done for today. File, Save Scene. If you wanted to save different iterations when we come in next class, we'll save this as number 2 or number 3 or number 4 or whatever. Now we're going to go to Exit. We're going to wait for Maya to close. And then we're going to back up our preferences. Okay, we can close that window. Cool. Okay, so on the P drive, we have that 2016 folder. We didn't change any preferences, but it is a good habit to get into to start saving your preferences every class. Save them every class and then restore them every class. So I'm going to copy the preferences folder here. So I just hit Control C. I'm going to go into my folder delete the old one, and paste the new one in. So I just deleted the old 2016 folder, and I'm pasting the new folder in there. Okay, so now I have the latest version of my preferences, so in case I change something, it'll be there. Now all of our window positions, okay, where we located the outliner, where we located any other windows that may have popped up, Maya saves all of those, all right? Which is a neat thing that it saves them, because if you had a specific layout of where you had windows, it'll remember all that stuff. The bad thing is we're on dual screens here. So if you save your preferences and you use them at home and you only have one screen, it may move your stuff off to this blank area here that's no longer there. And there's other ways to get it, okay? But just so you're aware that it's there. Now, for our work, you should make sure you back up this folder. All the stuff we did today is inside that folder. So you want to take that and you want to put that onto your jump drive or onto your external or wherever it is you're saving your stuff outside of this. Because if we come in next class and we continue working on this and you don't have that portion of it, then you're going to be missing out on that stuff. You have to redo it all. And that